You need to leave my car alone. If you say so, by MaliciousCompliance borderline. This is not my story but my friend Adam's. Adam is a retired police officer and this takes place in the mid-90s, back when Adam was a beat cop maybe a year or two into his service. At the time this story takes place, a firebug had targeted several businesses over the course of a 3-month period. The fires were put out but they were getting bigger and bigger, causing thousands of dollars in damage. Everyone was on edge and the police were patrolling the area every night to try and catch Mr. Firebug. On this particular night in the middle of February, Adam and his partner, Rick, drew the short stick and thus were assigned to patrol part of the area. While on patrol, he notices a classic Mercedes-Benz pulling up to a house and a familiar lady dressed in a thick fur coat steps out. He groans, it's the wife of a local business owner that every officer in this town have had the displeasure to ticket for various parking/traffic violations. It would have been fine if she were a nice lady or something. But no. Her 3 default sentences were, "Don't you know who I am? Where's your manager/supervisor, and I'll have your job." Seriously, she was a Karen before Karens were even a thing. Rick points out to Adam that Karen had parked right by a fire hydrant. PAR for the course. Adam gets ready and steps out of the squad car. "Good evening, Mrs. Entitled, ma'am," Adam said. "What are you doing here?" Karen bellowed. Adam guessed that's the Karen version of the word hello. "Working the beat. You do know you parked next to a fire hydrant." "So?" Karen said. "I'm suggesting you move it before I write you a ticket. I'm not in the mood for extra paperwork tonight. Listen. You need to leave my car alone. Or I'll have your job." With that, Karen storms off to the house, goes inside and slams the door. Adam thought "if you say so" and proceeded to check the outside of the car for any more violations and wishing that being a bitch was a federal offense. As he's putting the ticket under the windshield wiper, the call everyone's been dreading comes on the radio. A fire alarm has been triggered. The address? Right across the street. Adam looks over at the building and can see a faint orange glow in the windows on the 2nd floor. He reports the glow. He and Rick get ready in case Mr. Firebug decides to cross their path. Several officers arrive and set a perimeter around the building as the glow gets brighter and brighter. Unfortunately, by the time the fire department gets there, flashover happens and all the windows on the 2nd floor get blown out. It was so hot that Adam felt sweat form on his face. The fire department need to get the hoses set up. But Karen's car is in the way. Using safety hammers, they break the windows and run the hoses through, getting everything set up in record time. During all of the chaos, Karen comes out and she sounds like a banshee that had swallowed an air raid siren. She runs over and tries unhooking the hose from the hydrant. "What are you doing? My car is ruined." It took 2 officers to restrain her and bark at her to go inside and let everyone do their jobs. She actually listened and returned inside. Adam spent the rest of his shift helping with the fire and investigation. It was close to dawn when he returned to the station to finish up. All he wanted was to go home and crawl into bed. That's when his supervisor calls Rick and him over and reports that Karen reported several $1,000s worth of damage. Not only had her windows broken but water had gotten in and froze because it was, again, the middle of February. The supervisor asked them what happened and they reported everything. Fortunately, the dashcam caught a recording of the event. The supervisor shook her head, laughed and said, "Well, you had nothing to do with the car getting damaged, so I consider this closed." A few weeks later, they caught the firebug, a different business owner who was trying to commit insurance fraud. He figured that if several other buildings caught fire, nobody would think he was responsible for burning down his own business. Unfortunately, Karen never did seem to learn her lesson, so she was back to racking up tickets and being a thorn in the police's side. She did have to pay for the damages and the ticket Adam gave her. "The boss wants me to stand in the corner?" "Okay," by MaliciousCompliance borderline. Years ago, I was a photographer at a major theme park and worked with the characters on an almost daily basis. Our famous character is a mouse that owns the whole park. Everyone who worked there either referred to him as Boss or Mr. Mouse around guests. For the purposes of this post, I'll refer to him as Boss. One morning, I was assigned to work with the boss. He was in a mischievous mood and being an overall goofball. I enjoyed this and so did our guest/character attendants. One of his favorite things to do when he was in a mischievous mood was try to pass me the autograph books he had signed, conveniently ignoring the fact that I had my hands full with a camera. As I went to take them, he'd drop them and run away, making a laughing motion. So we're with this family and boss does his usual pass the autograph books to the photographer stunt. He holds them out expectantly and I said I'd love to, boss, but you know I don't know my ABCs. At this, the boss drops the books, takes my hand, moves me to a corner and points to the floor, telling me to stay like I was a naughty child. Malicious compliance mode, activated. Okay, I guess I'm grounded, I said, pouting. Everyone at this point is howling with laughter, even our head manager, Diane, who had stepped in to watch. So boss continues his interaction with the family. Now at the end of the session, we have the family pose with the character. So boss gets everyone together and poses with the popular Tata. Except, there's no photographer. After a moment, the boss motions to the family to wait and stomps over to my corner. I'm fighting back a grin at this point as he turns me around, points to my camera and then held his hands up as if to say what gives. Boss, you told me I'm grounded, remember? I said with a sweet innocent smile. It's at this point Diane pipes in with that you did, Mr. Mouse. Boss playfully drags me back to my spot and poses again. We get the photo and send the family on their way. Diane stepped out with them and offered to send them through again to get more pictures because I didn't take many, on account of me being grounded. The family accepted, although the dad, who had tears in his eyes at this point, said it was the hardest he's laughed in a long time. To this day, it still brings a smile to my face. My 8-year-old daughter just MC'd me, by user Jack's Magic Man. I am tired of seeing her clothes all over her floor when she has a laundry basket right there in her room. So I went off on her and told her to get all her dirty clothes off her floor and into the laundry room. I go about doing some other things and I come back and there are still some towels and socks on the floor. So I tell her to get those too. She says, I didn't know you meant towels. I say, get everything that is washable off your floor and into the laundry room. I come back up 20 minutes later and every stuffed animal and sheet along with the towels are in the laundry room now. Because in her words, you said everything washable. Edit, I want to point out that while this is MC, she did it with a smile and there was no yelling or anything. It was a moment of, you got me from me and she knew exactly what she was doing and gave me a smile and took the stuffies out without much asking. It was all in good fun on her part. What are you going to do about it? Call the cops, by user quiet borderline. I was explaining to my mom what malicious compliance was and she reminded me of this story. I was a senior in high school when all of a sudden I got sick at school and had to be sent home. Because my car was in the shop, Mom had to come get me. It's about 9:30 a.m. when this happened. As we're driving up a very busy street, we see two 7 to 8-year-old kids, we'll call them Frank and Zelda, trying to cross. Worried, Mom pulls over to see what's going on. The conversation went roughly as follows. Mom, kids, are you guys okay? What are you two doing here? Frank, Dr. Idiot said we couldn't come to school early so he sent us home. Now Mom is very familiar with Dr. Idiot. He was the principal at the elementary school my younger brother was attending at the time. My brother, Mark, was going through some behavioral issues at the time and Mom was commonly called to the office, to the point they were on a first-name basis. Not that he allowed her to use his first name because I have a doctorate in education. So it's Dr. Idiot. So in other words he was an entitled idiot. There was a gas station 10 feet away so Mom tells Frank and Zelda to meet us there. We pulled in, got some water for the kids as it was a hot day and Mom calls Dr. Idiot's cell phone. Again, the conversation went roughly as follows. Idiot, this is Dr. Idiot. Mom, hi, this is Mark's mom. I have two kids here named Frank and Zelda and they say they were sent home early? Idiot, yes, their parents dropped them off at 6 a.m. because they had to work. Something about mandatory overtime. Of course we're not a daycare so I just told the kids to go home and wait for the bus. Mom, are you kidding me? We're 5 miles away from the school. They walked all that way. It's a wonder they weren't hit by a car or kidnapped. Idiot, what are you going to do about it? Call the cops? Click. Mom was absolutely floored but she decided to give Dr. Idiot a nice dose of reality. At the time, we lived in a small town. How small? So small that sometimes the chief of police would have to walk the beat. And that day, he happened to be a block or so away from the gas station. When he got the call, he arrived, got the whole story from not only Frank and Zelda but from Mom and me. And, being a father of 2 elementary-aged kids himself, he was pissed. He looked at Mom and said, Chief of Police, it's time I had some words with Dr. Idiot. The Chief of Police drove Frank and Zelda to the school in the squad car, which they were super excited about, personally escorted them to their class and then marched to Dr. Idiot's office and proceed to tear him a new butthole, telling Dr. Idiot that he'd help the parents press charges on him for child endangerment, among other things. From that day on, Dr. Idiot allowed Frank and Zelda to be at the school early on the days their parents had mandatory overtime. Update: so I got some details from Mom about why Frank and Zelda were just dropped off at school. Their aunt works at the elementary school and had agreed to watch them until school started a couple of hours later. She wasn't on the clock. Frank and Zelda didn't live in a good part of town and their parents, understandably, didn't feel their kids would be safe if they were alone. If Dr. Idiot had driven them home to wait for the bus, it wouldn't have gotten on the Chief of Police's nerves. Update 2, as for why the aunt didn't see the kids? The parents dropped the kids off 10 minutes before the aunt arrived and Dr. Idiot assured them that he'd watch the kids for the 10 minutes. Once they were gone, he told the kids to scram. When the aunt got there, she came in a different direction so she didn't see them. He told her that the kids hadn't been dropped off. Since they were at workplace was very anal about cell phone usage, she had no way to reach them to confirm that. She had no freaking clue what really happened until the Chief of Police turned up with the kids in tow. And yes, I have no idea how Dr. Idiot kept his job. You suspended me for 7 days, not 6, by user ill communication 138. Kinda long but I'll make it as short as possible. So, for context, this happened back in 2015/2016. I'm a single mom, 23F, at the time and only had a young son to tend to. So, I was waitressing at a restaurant that I will call East End for this story that was in the heart of the rough area of our town, but a major success due to the support of our community and area-wide parties we were known for throwing. It even resulted in another restaurant being built on the West Coast. However, behind the scenes, our best-known secret was that our checks would never clear and cashing them anywhere was always an issue due to mismanagement of funds. They even put $0 on my W-2 form even though I put back funds from each supposed check, which I think is illegal. Throughout this, I stayed faithful to them and worked hard almost daily, bringing my son with me from lack of childcare. I even worked an entire month from 9 a.m. to sometimes 3 a.m. I was eventually made top waitress and got a $1.25 raise, which wasn't much on waitress pay, but still, every penny counted. But soon, the owner passed the company down to his son, and when his son took over, everything was okay until he hired 2 employees. I'll call them Tina, an older female, and Leah, an old schoolmate. So over time, I noticed that my boss's son started getting closer to them to a point where they were hanging out after work. Then, one day, a meeting occurred to where they both named managers, even though I had 2 years of seniority and top sales, and my job title and pay raise were both taken. As if that was not heartbreaking enough, my work ethic started getting picked apart by them, especially Tina, who would call me a table hog and not a team player, even though I brought in the most sales. So finally, the last straw came on an event night. I had worked the entire lunch rush that day and was asked to cover the late shift since they knew I knew how to work it. Tina decided to make me the register waitress, meaning I could only work the front bar and door and not take tables. You made enough money for today, she said with a snark and walked off. Now my family happened to walk in and requested for me to host their table. There was a rule saying that if a certain worker was requested, that worker would take it. But my manager was upset by this because she had to work front in my place. By the end of the night, she pulled up the computer and the following conversation happens. Tina, what did you do for this table? Me, confused and angry, who is questioning my orders? Tina, taken aback, I was wanting to see was what you did for them worth being suspended for a week. I had no choice but to work when as a manager, I am supposed to just sit back and observe everything to make sure things go right. Me, excuse me? You know the rule. But you know what, whatever, fuck this. I stormed out in tears. The next day, I go in for my check when I notice on the schedule that I was only suspended for 6 days and scheduled to work on the 7th day for a huge part that was supposed to happen. Cue malicious compliance. I went directly to the boss and told him I thought I was suspended for 7 days, not 6, and had plans for that day, which I didn't LMBO. My boss saw this and pointed it out to Tina, who had no choice but to enforce my suspension. That night I drove by and the streets were packed. I blew the horn and waved. The staff told me that due to poor planning of suspension of her best server and being short-staffed, she struggled to find coverage and was yelled at by the boss for her poor leadership, and she had to work it herself. I found a job that week and quit and told them that my 2 weeks notice was when they would notice I wasn't coming back.